going to start with a small confession, which is that I'm mildly obsessed with crisis management and all things social media. And I think this actually started back in the late 90s, which is going to date me hugely. I was working at BBC at the time, and the team that I ran, amongst many things, we were working for BBC Online, we were on something called Royal Watch, which was essentially if a member of the royal family met an untimely death, we were the team ready with the pictures to choose. We had to choose the appropriate pictures and get them up on the website as quickly as possible to drive traffic from BBC Online to the news site. Now, being kind of sick person that I am and someone who takes my job very seriously, I used to ring my team in the middle of the night and come up with different creative scenarios of what had just happened to a member of the royal family so that I could test them and see how fast they were and whether they were actually running to the different processes. So that's my confession. But the thing about what I was doing is that we were rehearsing a crisis, and it meant that the team was very much ready for all sort of things that did happen, royal deaths. But I think that the key point that I'm trying to make is that it's really important to rehearse a crisis, and this is why the military use drills, for example, and many years on, so I now actually run e-moderation, which is a social media agency, and as well as looking after moderating campaigns for agencies and running the social media for large brands, so writing on their Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, etc. A big part of what we do is crisis management, because we're right at the forefront of what's happening. We're right at the cliff edge, and we built a crisis simulation tool that allows clients to go through the sort of real-life drama of being in the middle of a social media crisis without actually having to go through it. So why is it important to rehearse a crisis and also prepare? And the reason is this. The monkey brain, which I will explain, and apologies for the rather crap drawing because I get told off by my lawyer for stealing copyrighted images from the internet, so I drew this one myself. But the key thing about the monkey brain is that during a crisis, your brain chemistry actually changes. And it's a very stressful situation, but your brain changes to go back to a more sort of previous time, shall we say, where your brain was protecting you to run from predators. And this is exactly what happens in a crisis. And it means that you shut down, and instinct kicks in, and it means that you make really bad decisions. And this can apply during a social media crisis, and it applies to all of you who are actually involved in looking after the reputation of a brand. Can I just do the annoying participation thing and just ask, has anyone here actually been involved in a social media crisis on behalf of the client? Okay, a few of you looking slightly jaded, a little bit of glare in your eyes. Does anyone else think that they will never have to go through a social media crisis on behalf of the client? So never, so I'm using that. Basically, do you all think at some point you might have to go through a social media crisis? Then getting a few nods, okay. So basically, there are some key points that happen and why it's such a pressure on teams at the moment. It's a stressful time. And really, there are these hot seat factors for anyone involved in going through a crisis. So one pressure point for teams involved, and this is why it's important to rehearse and to plan so you don't make bad decisions during these pressure points, these hot seat factors, rather. The speed of response, it's so different now. For anyone involved, coming more from the sort of PR side of things, there was a time where there was perhaps 24 hours to get a press release out. Now you have about 15 minutes on Twitter, that's the expectation of the public, and you have an hour on Facebook. That's what we're seeing in the industry. So the pressure is on for the team involved that if something has gone wrong, bang, you haven't got wrong. Visibility is quite a key thing for anyone involved. And what this means is that in this lovely world of social media, where everything is so open and transparent, it means that agencies involved with a brand where something goes wrong, people, it's very easy to find out who's the agency involved, individuals on the campaign, everything is just so visible now. So this is extra pressure on all of you in the room if you're going to be involved in this. Unpredictability. Many people are not always used to actually dealing directly with the public, and again, when you're working on Facebook and Twitter, that's what you've got. You're dealing directly with the public, and they're pretty unpredictable, shall we say. And a lot of the time, you don't know what their agenda is, you don't know if they're having a bad day, you don't know if they're actually from another brand trying to mess things up for you. Now, combined with lack of control, so you may be able to control the campaign that you're putting out, you certainly can't control the conversation that happens after that, in the same way that you can't control what people say in a pub. So that's, a stressful factor. The other thing is that this is actually still a very young industry, when I'm talking specifically about social media, and it just means that everything that's happening is being scrutinised by so many different people, whether it's actually that a brand has really messed up and you work on a competitor brand and think, thank God that wasn't me, or there are sort of social media pundits and annoying people like me using it all as case studies. So everyone is just all eyes and ears on how you actually react at the time. So again, it's stressful. And the other thing is the boomerang effect, which is that even though you may sort of do very creative campaigns, there is the fear that things might come back to haunt you professionally and individually. So, for example, the Hyundai ad that was leaked by, allegedly leaked by an agency, or sort of went viral. Now, many people thought this was a really funny campaign. This guy was actually attempting to commit suicide, but the emissions were all water-based, so he was never going to commit suicide. Now, to some people that was very, very creative, and other people, really bad media storm, because people were saying this is so offensive, hitting Twitter, and the brand had to distance themselves from the agency. So that's the sort of, when you're trying to be creative and push the boundaries, it can actually sort of come back on you. So essentially, I see this, that there are two types of crisis. One is the one that you just can't avoid, and the other one is the one you can avoid. And so real-world crisis can still affect a brand. We all know that Tesco's was not expecting to be caught up in the News of the World crisis, for example, but because they were an advertiser, people were putting them under pressure to remove their advertising. They couldn't have seen that coming. The way that major events happen, so a tornado hitting is now sort of captured on Twitter immediately. So these are things that you just cannot plan for, but you can plan to a certain extent. And then there are things that you really can plan for. So for example, lazy community management. So setting auto filters and auto tweets, so that this one was American Airlines basically must have had an auto tweet on that anyone who said something positive about them, they would auto tweet, thank you very much. Doesn't help when there's sarcasm, so congrats to American Air and US Airways on creating the largest, shittiest airline in the world, was met with, thanks for your support, we look forward to a bright future. So that is not going to help their reputation. Also things that can be avoided, it's one of my personal favourites, the American Red Cross. Drunk tweeting can be avoided by not drinking and then tweeting. So the American Red Cross actually tweeted that they found some Dogfish Head's Midas Touch beer and that they were getting drunk. Also, note spelling mistakes. When you drink, you make spelling mistakes and you forget to put the I in getting slizzard. However, this is a really good example of good crisis management, because what the Red Cross did is that they actually used comedy very effectively, immediately retweeted that they deleted the wrong tweet and that they were sober and confiscated the keys. And there was also a nice little payoff that actually, because this one did go a bit viral, that the brewer, Dogfish Head, actually donated to the Red Cross. So, a really nice end story of something that had gone a little bit wrong. And I'm sure that Ryan is feeling a little bit bad about it. The last one is tweeting from the wrong account. We see so many examples of this. This was one by KitchenAid USA, who do fabulous KitchenAid products which I use for baking. Not a client, I promise, just like them. However, classic mistake, you used the wrong account and they were sort of sending political comments on their Twitter account, which was then picked up. So, how do you get around this? Well, the key thing is, it is possible to plan for a crisis. So, for example, if you know that your campaign is going to be very controversial, you can actually test what it's going to be like on social media. So whether that's actually just using a brainstorming session, using a focus group, and then planning how would you respond on social media, or using a lovely simulation tool built by eModeration, for example. You can actually simulate a campaign and then test the responses by the public just to see how your team would respond. BIC is a great one that could have done with perhaps a little bit of rehearsal of the backlash that they got. Now this one was a great one. It's, basically BIC released pens for girls in pink and violet. And there was a major backlash on things like Amazon reviews, and they asked Ellen DeGeneres to be their spokeswoman, and of course she just took the piss completely, did a video skit about it. And I think they could have rehearsed some of their responses and maybe got into the joke about it. But and if anyone was responsible for BIC here, apologies or maybe thanks for alerting me to the fact that I had such mannish writing before, but now using a pink pen, it's all fine. The other thing you can do ahead of time is decide what does actually constitute a crisis. So it's not necessarily the fact that just because there is a negative review on Amazon or someone writes something bad on Facebook, for example, that's not a crisis, that's just customer service. However, if at the point that very influential people that you're following actually start retweeting and they've got millions of followers, that could be a potential crisis. Or a boycott page, that's definitely a crisis. Mainstream media, definitely a crisis. If you decide in the team what these different points are, it means that you can react and have your sort of process in place. Very importantly, you need to work with other agencies involved. Everything is so blurred these days. So there's PR, advertising, social media agencies, the client, of course. Something that we do is that we always set up an escalation document right at the beginning of everyone that's actually involved, so that if something goes wrong, you know exactly who to call and who to involve in the crisis team. Hopefully a very obvious one, but monitoring the actual, monitoring what's being said once the campaign launches or the work that you're doing is just gone live. There are so many good tools out there now. You don't have to just monitor positive and negative. You can actually monitor emotion, intent to buy. There's some great tools out there now. Accept criticism. It's okay. People are going to hate you, say bad things. That's just the public. It's knowing that you don't need to sort of wipe everything away. It's actually very healthy. Someone will be coming along and saying positive things. So just calm down and get over it. Knowing when to walk away as well. There are particular audiences who are always going to hate a particular brand or just hate a particular subject. I mean, you're not going to suddenly convert loads of Mac users to Windows, for example. So there's no point in always trying to fix everything or respond to everybody. Just know when to just step away or ring-fence the nutters, as we call it. But also know when to take action. I mean, there was a great example a couple of Christmases ago with John Lewis, where they did an ad campaign with a dog as part of the Christmas campaign, and the dog was outside in the doghouse. And loads of people, lots of animal lovers were just sort of saying, this is terrible, you can't leave the dog outside. And even though they tried to explain that this particular breed of dog was fine and can live outside, that wasn't the answer, and they did actually end up sort of reshooting the video and released a new video. So sometimes you just have to know when to do something different, apologise or take action. And the last thing is, again, going back to the transparency on social media, is make sure that the product is up to it, because if you actually release a product and it's terrible, everyone's just going to shout about it. So it's just something to bear in mind. So I hope that gives a little sort of flavour for this evening, and if anyone wants to swap battle stories later on or ask me any questions, by all means do. Thank you.